Welcome to Integrated Indiana's 7 o'clock talk. And tonight we're going to do a little cereal history, a little breakfast cereal history. And it's going to start with Dr. Kellogg. What was his first name? John?
John Harvey Kellogg.
John Harvey Kellogg, and some history. Just to give you a little background on this, I have followed a Dr. Robert Lustig now for probably, 5-10 years. And I first started to follow him when there was a presentation that he did, and it was called Sugar the Bitter Truth. And he goes through the biochemistry. Hi, Kathy. He goes through the biochemistry
Yes, Kathy.
of why fructose in particular, why fructose is just like drinking alcohol. And so fructose goes through the liver, forms acetaldehyde just like alcohol does. It just doesn't affect the brain, but it gives you fatty liver. So all of these Gatorades with fructose, all these sports drinks with fructose, all of these, juice. If you're just drinking regular juice, that is also a form of fructose. And so it gives you fatty liver disease, just as if you're an alcoholic. So that's actually termed non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, or NAFLD, and it is the number one cause of liver transplants in children. So he has written another book called Metabolical. And in Metabolical, he starts to discuss the history, and he's going through the entire history. I guess because he's now retired, he is like, I'm just going to let the cat out of the bag. And he does. And he goes through the history of medicine, he goes through the history of the FDA and regulatory things, and he shows how the breakdown of these things happen. Absolutely fascinating. I finished the book today, and during the read, Jessica got so tickled because I played a portion of the radio for her, or a portion of the talk for her, on this John Harvey Kellogg, who formed the sand. And she's like, I never heard any of this. So then she went on this day of looking this guy up, and all I could hear in the back room was, "Oh my God, Trevor, you got! Did you know this? Did you know this?" So I will let her tell you the history of breakfast cereal.
There's a lot of it you just don't really. You'll have to read for yourself because we just can't put it out there for everybody. But he brought in a little thing to listen to, and I just kept saying, like, what are you talking about? And he's like, Dr. Kellogg. And I'm like, I never heard of the guy. And he's like, it's like Kellogg, like breakfast cereal. And I'm like, oh, I didn't know he was a doctor. And he's like, yeah, actually, I researched this all day. It was because the more I researched, the more I found, and it was, I just kept going down rabbit holes because the guy was just absolutely fascinating and bizarre. And I said, that sounds like a psychopath or a sociopath because you just can't have those thoughts and not be.
We'll qualify him first.
So so I'm going to.
Oh, okay, sorry.
So he actually was a physician, and he worked and trained at the Bellevue Hospital, which was one of and the Bellevue is the first public hospital in the United States. His education was funded by the Latter-day Saints, Seventh Adventist.
Seventh Day Adventist, Mrs. White.
Yes, funded his education. So he was absolutely a brilliant physician, way ahead of his time. And that was in the 1820s.
Yeah, something like that.
So in the 1800s. So he founded, so that was when sanatoriums were big, and they usually housed the mentally, the psychotic people, invalids, and people returning from war. And so they kind of housed him in there, so that sanatoriums kind of got a negative uh, tone on them. So he actually created a new word, and it actually became a word in the dictionary, and he called it sanitarium. And it was a flip on that, and it was health oriented. So this guy actually was a brilliant surgeon who did, he would, he felt like in order to heal people, he would cut out different portions of their bowels. But what was so fascinating is he had very few negative outcomes for his patients. So he actually, when you have to research this on your own, but as far as a physician, he was basically giving people fecal transplants with yogurt. You were supposed to eat yogurt and enemas. So he believed in enemas because he believed that every illness and disease originated in the gut, and that you had to take care of the gut or you were just going to be sick. So that's where your vitality came from. He didn't believe that you should share germs with others in relations, and you can go with that wherever you want to.
What do you call that? Auto intoxication.
Yeah, you were auto intoxicating yourself. What was it? Food was your medicine, and he considered whole foods like fresh fruits, fresh vegetables. You should never eat meat, and he did a presentation where he put red meat out under a microscope and manure, and the red meat had more microbes and bacteria in it than the manure. So he believed that the way to a clean, healthy life was to stay celibate, if unless you were procreating, and you needed to wash your colon out twice a day. You should not have anything except whole grains, fresh fruits, and fresh vegetables. And so on that part of his little, I don't even know what you would call it, his little ego, he had multiple ones, but as far as a physician, he was fascinating and brilliant.
But he also believed, so he was a theological zealot, and he believed that, like, and I'm sure you're going to get to it.
Yeah, I was getting ready to get there.
Go right ahead.
So there was two things in his life that he was passionate about that you needed to take care of. One, he was concerned with constipation, and the second one, which is the odd part about him that took me down a whole new rabbit hole, was masturbation. So when we are putting that cereal on our kitchen table because it's that healthy, nutritious meal for your children, there's a whole lot of history steeped in those flakes. And it was created because he created a biscuit at his sanitarium for health, which was fiber and all the good stuff, because fiber was king. And a lady broke her tooth, and she wanted compensation for it. So he needed to figure out how to get something good, which also was bland and mushy and no flavor, because he believed that if he could create food that was bland, then that would lower libido and children would not touch themselves.
Spicy foods was
sexy.
Yeah.
That was a no. So they actually had left the dough out on the table from making the bread, and it fermented. And so they rolled it out the next morning, and they realized that it flaked. And then they cooked it, baked it, and then they tried to bring that to the mass. And then he felt like if he brought that to children, that they would grow and not touch themselves. But he went totally to this extreme side of this at this sanitarium, and he did up to 45 different baths. They would
circumcise without anesthesia.
Children. And then if that didn't work, they took and they sewed parts of the male organ to other parts of their body so that it would hurt them. And they would burn little girls'
They would use
genitalia off.
carbolic acid on the female genitalia so they would not touch themselves.
They would bandage, cage,
Hands and male members.
electrocute, and all kinds of stuff, trying to keep, because they felt like that was ruining the human race. So that was one part of him, and then the third part of him was the businessman. So the cereal flakes that everybody puts on their breakfast table every morning was created
Kellogg cereal
for the reason to keep people from masturbating, but also to help them not become constipated.
I still the movie. There's a movie called The Road to Wellville, and
Actually, it was
very
very
adult.
accurate though, but it was very accurate based on my research. And I researched like all kinds of different articles, and it was I'm still in awe of the information that was provided. But he was a brilliant businessman.
Well, his brother, yeah.
So his brother, how they acquired the company is his brother was his bookkeeper for this sanitarium, and they were partners. And so I think he actually, I don't know if that he was morally right, but I think he stole portions of it. But him and his brother worked together, and somehow he got most of the company in.
Well, he wasn't interested in taking the cereal to the masses. He just wanted to keep it in, they called it the sand. He wanted to keep it in the sand, but the brothers saw the marketability of this. So now you had an easy breakfast cereal, and this is kind of where breakfast is the most important part of the day starts to come about.
But nobody in the masses would eat it unless they put loads of sugar in it. So in the United States, it didn't fly, but it overseas it did. But they had to put tons of sugar in it, and it didn't get really big until Frosties came out, which was sugar coated.
And a guy by the name of Post also stole the flake and made the Post flakes. And the original biscuit was kind of like, what was that granola, the Post, like the grape nuts.
Well, actually, so he was also an inventor. He invented something called the granuluma or something. So basically, the granola came from it. He also created peanut butter, soy milk, and there was another thing. It was crazy the information I got on him, but he was a fascinating man, and he believed in you should meditate daily, you should work on your breathing, you should eat lots of fiber, lots of water, no meat, and all the whole grains and the whole vegetables. So health wise, the guy was absolutely brilliant. He was just born way before his time. He just took it too far on many levels. And we should really think about why we put the things on our tables and where it actually came from. But it was fascinating to me. We laughed and laughed and laughed. It was absolutely hilarious. And he was married, so he believed that you should be celibate. So he and his wife were married, and they had fostered 40 some children, but never had any of their own because he did not live a life like that with his wife.
Yep.
Adopted 8 and probably had some real issues in his world.
Yeah, it's fascinating. So the book that history comes from is called Metabolical by Dr. Robert Lustig. The movie is called The Road to Wellville. Don't watch it with small children. There's nudity in there and questionable morals. But
it's very accurate to the literature that's written about him.
So, with that being said, we'll see you February 28th, 6:30 at the Jennings County Library. Go to integratedhealthofindiana.com, sign up, get your questionnaires, and we'll see you there, and we'll see you next week.